In sports, the term Cinderella story is used to refer to situations in which competitors achieve far greater success than would reasonably have been expected, and we could see examples of these sterling performances through sports history, ranging from the 1968 New York Jets when they beat the heavily favored NFL champion Baltimore Colts in Super Bowl III, 1980 U.S. Olympic men's hockey team consisting of amateur and collegiate players defeating the Soviet Union, considered the best hockey team in the world at the time, and more recently the 2015 Leicester City Football Club, who won the Premier League championship, the first in their 132-year history, just 2 seasons after gaining promotion to the Premier League. These examples show us that while not probable, the unexpected is possible, and when everything falls into place, we are witness to something truly entertaining and inspirational. In a video game industry dominated by multi-billion-dollar publishers with massive development and advertising budgets, do we, the gaming community, have a story on the scale of the aforementioned examples that can compare in grandeur, stature, and success? Do we have that inspirational tale of an unknown developer and publisher that came out of nowhere and essentially developed a genre-defining game and achieved far greater success than would reasonably have been expected? It's LtBuzzLitebeer, and today I present to you our gaming version of the Cinderella story from little-known game developer Digital Extremes and their gaming masterpiece, Warframe. I originally found Warframe back in 2014 when, after purchasing my PlayStation 4 and attempting to tackle the massive debacle known as Battlefield 4, I found myself asking, well, what now? Next-gen consoles just didn't have many titles to choose from, and after passing on the few AAA titles that were available, I stumbled upon Warframe in the free-to-play section of the PlayStation Store, ultimately being sold on the game's tagline, "Ninjas play free." Essentially a console port of the PC version, that early version of Warframe proved to be a dichotomy of polish and confusion. Taking full advantage of the next-gen console capabilities, Warframe was a visually stunning piece of graphical art that had a unique ability to empower the player with some of the most lethal and devastating firepower I had ever seen in a game. At the same time, it was one of the most confusing games I had ever attempted, as it had no real tutorial, no laid out theme or plot, and it essentially just threw you into a confusing star chart, handed you a set of weapons, patted you on the ass, and sent you into the universe to start killing baddies while farming for resources. Despite the shortcomings and confusions, I stuck with Warframe until update 14.0 and the third major quest update, The Howl of the Kubro, and shelved it shortly thereafter. Fast forward nearly 2 years from my original taste of Warframe to present day, and I found myself starting to look for alternatives to Tom Clancy's The Division, a game that I have played and built my YouTube channel around over the past year and a half. Now, while discussing possible alternatives amongst my gaming community friends, a suggestion came in the form of a question, and it actually shocked me to my core, with that question being, have you ever heard of this new game called Warframe? Knowing of the past game I had played for some time, I was a bit reluctant to return to the noble battles of the Tenno. Still, I fondly remembered the superior game movements and exceedingly strong player power fantasy, but was then immediately sobered up by the memories of the overly complicated UI and vague game mechanics. So, I decided to do a bit of research, and shortly thereafter discovered that Digital Extremes had released a further 7 updates since I had left the game, bringing the total up to 21, with update 22, The Plains of Eidolon, the first open-world setting in the game's history, set to release later this year. In addition, nearly every feature and function of the game had received extensive overhauls since my departure. Further research led me, like many PC players, to the Steam charts, and after taking a quick look at the top 10 games by player count, I was stunned to see Warframe, a game that I still can't remember ever seeing a single advertisement for, a game that was introduced in 2013 and built on a free-to-play model, hanging tough with strong player counts that averaged 10 times that of my beloved Tom Clancy title, The Division. This was all the proof I needed, as there was clearly something more here than I remembered, something that was quietly attracting large player counts on a consistent basis, and clearly, it was time to return. Upon re-downloading Warframe, this time for my PC, I could instantly see the massive development changes since I had last played on PS4. There was a full tutorial and preface hashing out a preamble of sorts and adding more lore and production value to the story development. Upon finishing the tutorial section and reaching my ship, used as a central hub for storage, transactions, modding, gear construction, and mission selections, I was stunned by how many more planets had been added to the star map. Clearly, the developers had been hard at work to expand Warframe into a more complete and complex game in my near 2-year absence. Since Warframe is quite different than most games you have seen or played, let's lay down a bit of a foundation of what to expect before jumping straight in. If somebody that had never played Warframe were to ask me what it's like, the closest analogy I could give them would be like taking a Cirque du Soleil show and God of War video game and throwing them together into a cosmic blender. Warframes are seemingly not bound by gravity and can scale and run along vertical faces with ease. In addition, they can perform all manner of acrobatics, all while engaging in combat, and the speed of the movements while playing Warframe is truly staggering. Seeing and engaging in this type of hyper-speed space-age parkour is truly refreshing and addictive as hell. Mastering these different movement combos takes time, but once you have an intimate understanding of your movement commands, it becomes something of an art form. Warframe forces you into a strict third-person perspective, and at these movement speeds and at the verticality that Warframe demands, you wouldn't want any other perspective. The entire game is built on frenetic action sequences with shooter elements and a strong dose of melee combat thrown in for good measure. All the missions and maps are generated from a pool of pre-programmed rooms and sub-rooms and then randomly assembled for each mission. Think of the map design as a box of Legos, and even though you have seen each block before, it is the randomness of how they are assembled that adds to the variation and nuance of each map design. There is no story mode that you may be used to seeing in other games, even though there are many short quests to complete that add to the plot development and lore. Squad play is easily attained by using the matchmaking system, and for those hardcore solo players, you do have the option to make your squad private and tackle the game by yourself. Warframe is a looter shooter, but not in the traditional sense in that it does not drop complete weapons and gear, but rather blueprints and resources necessary to construct newer and better weaponry. And finally, Warframe is an extremely complex game with a seemingly unlimited number of modding and build possibilities, and allows you to play in whatever style you choose. Before we continue on with this review, I want to backtrack just a bit and really touch on the fact that Warframe is built on a free-to-play model and how the studio funds current and future content. Monetization and in-game microtransactions are always a sensitive subject with the gaming community, as these types of systems are perceived as a way to squeeze the player base for more and more money. However, the Warframe community knows that Digital Extremes needs to make money to keep the evolution and sustainability of Warframe ongoing. Now, what makes their system of rewards unique to free-to-play games is the way it doles out loot, and let me be clear, you can play this game without ever spending money and still have the same fulfilling gaming experience as somebody that does actively spend money in-game. However, you will need to spend considerably more time grinding for gear to get the same level of equipment as that player that pays for it in full. In-game transactions can be performed through the use of Platinum, Warframe's in-game currency, and the conversion rate is roughly 15 cents real money for 1 Platinum. In the past, free-to-play games had intentionally overgrinding in-game economies that were designed to make players aggravated enough to spend real money to maintain a steady level of progress. Warframe breaks from that traditional free-to-play in-game economy and strikes a nice balance between playtime spent and rewards given. You will continually be rewarded with new portions of blueprints and sourcing the necessary resources to craft these gear pieces that you will never find yourself getting the feeling of tons of grind for no rewards. A quick analogy of how this monetization model works would be as follows. You have two identical theme parks side by side. The first park represents the normal purchase model from a AAA game studio in that they charge a full price admission charge to the park that gains you access to all of the rides, but you will need to wait in line to ride them. The second park represents the Warframe purchase model and differs in that they do not charge you any admission price to enter the park. You can simply walk right into the park and have access to ride any ride you choose by standing in line and waiting your turn. However, the Warframe park offers you the option to skip the lines and step directly onto the ride for a fee. Furthermore, when Park A releases DLC content, you will again need to purchase this content or not have access to this section of the park, while the Warframe park gives you instant access to all new content with no fees. You may be asking yourself what type of quality, complexity, and overall level of finish a free-to-play game is capable of delivering, and this is a totally valid question, especially when we take a look back into the past at what typical free-to-play games offered up to the player base. Whereas most games attempt to dumb down the player experience and shoehorn us into cookie-cutter builds and metas, Digital Extremes throws huge levels of complexity and diversification at the player experience and taps into our inner id and gives us all of the tools necessary to turn us into a Space Ninja badass. There are currently 33 unique Warframes to choose from, all with different skill sets, different armor levels, speed levels, and power levels, and each can be specifically modded to your taste. There are Warframes that specialize in close quarters combat, stealth and invisibility, crowd control, AoE. There are frames that freeze, frames that burn, frames that poison, frames that can kill with a sound, and a frame that can even raise the dead, and every manner of frame in between. In Warframe, there are hundreds of weapons to choose from, and whereas many games shamelessly offer up the same small group of weapons reskinned to look different, Warframe weapons are each uniquely differing in design, range, sound, recoil, and ammo types. There are sniper rifles, shotguns, crossbows, burst fire rifles, plasma cannons, bows and arrows, weapons that fire explosive shells, and so many more to choose from. Every type of melee weapon is available to equip, from swords to bow staffs, energy whips to brass knuckles, axes to warhammers, throwable glaives and javelins, and many of these melee types offer the option to dual wield. Within each Warframe and weapon type are individual modding capabilities for more ability range, speed, melee damage, energy, shields, health, whatever. The point is there are infinite possibilities to build your character or weaponry, and whatever you want to do, the devs have given you the ability to spec and mod for it. Every aspect of Warframe can be customized to your liking, and to be completely honest, this is truly a game within the game. You can customize your ship to whatever color scheme you like. You can decorate the interior with ancient treasures you loot within your missions. You can purchase artwork and bobblehead dolls to adorn your ship's interior. And on top of all of this, you can even set the color scheme for the interior and exterior for your ship right down to the color of the energy trail it leaves while loading into missions. Your Warframe is not exempt from this level of customization, and you are essentially given the keys to the paint factory. And every level of detail for your frame's exterior can be tailored to your liking, right down to the pinstriping and color of energy flowing throughout your Warframe. Looking the part is as much as being the part in Warframe, and players can spend hours crafting that perfect balance of attachments and colors to make sure everybody notices their frame. This is how player customization should be in every game, and truly allows us to individualize our gaming experiences and cements our attachment to the overall core gaming experience that Warframe delivers. As a classically trained musician, I would like to applaud composer Keith Power and the entire sound design team for their superb work on the Warframe soundtrack. From the chanting choral motifs to the rhythmic percussion tracks that are clearly inspired by Asian influences, the overall soundscape matches perfectly to the energetic combat sequences. There is just so much going on here. So much I have missed out on over my few years away from this gaming masterpiece. The visual and auditory landscape Warframe delivers is simply unparalleled, and to know that this game is built on a free-to-play model and was produced by a design studio of less than 200 employees is simply stunning. The pursuit of perfection by the entire team at Digital Extremes is clearly expressed in their gaming masterpiece and sets an insanely high mark for other AAA studios to aspire to match. I have left off many items from this review like Endo, Forma, and Orokin reactors, but that is perhaps better left for another day, as this review has gone on long enough. I am just 40 hours back into my Warframe experience and loving every second of this ever-evolving masterpiece. This has been LtBuzzLitebeer, and for now, I am back to the Warframe universe in search of my next adventure and to again be entirely enraptured by the player power fantasy that can only be delivered by Warframe.